I wanted to kind of set this up a little bit and give you some background on Aaron and also why the topic of today's conversation. You know, the Policy Circle, our goal is really to inspire civic engagement with truth and details. And we value leadership that is creative and steps out of the box. This past Monday, in case, you know, and we included this in the invitation, the Wall Street Journal published an editorial that was entitled Controlling the Virus Narrative. And the need for this editorial was triggered by a piece that was posted on Medium over the weekend that generated like 2.5 million views. And Medium took down the piece and labeled it as violating its rules, its guidelines, and as dangerous. The piece was written by Aaron Jin, and I actually happen to know Aaron Jin really well because he's working on projects that some colleagues and friends are working on. And I know that Aaron is a very thoughtful person, very analytical, soft-spoken, and I know that he had all the best of intentions in publishing this piece. You know, I'd like to quote the journal. You know, Twitter users and bloggers were sounding the alarm about the potential damage from coronavirus and inadequate testing before authorities and major media. And the situation today is really changing continuously. And while we need like accurate information for decision making, we need to be protected from charlatans, and we also need a churn of arguments and data to the response to the coronavirus as information becomes available. And shutting down these arguments, to quote the journal again, may really undermine the public faith in the official response because they have not been always right. So this conversation is about the data, and at some level the data that Aaron analyzed, but it's also really about sharing ideas, sharing details that may matter and may influence narrative, may influence decision making. So that's just setting the stage here of this conversation. We're not endorsing Aaron's piece, but at the same time we're valuing the question that he is putting, such as, you know, having a single and only number, it could be dangerous when we're called to make important decisions. To give you some background, Aaron is a Silicon Valley technologist who specializes in viral technology. And that was kind of misleading at the beginning of his piece, if you read that, how he described himself. So he's really about technology designs that have really rapid and wide adoption. And he also leads a network of technologists that's called Lincoln Labs. So as I said, I really know him really well, and I'm thrilled to having him with us today to really share, you know, what was his intent and what was his calling and the perspective that he brought. So he is going to be here in about 5 minutes, he told us. So I'd like to, you know, while we wait for him, maybe opening up, I know that there's a few hands already raised, and Judy, perhaps you can call on some of our participants to share their initial perspective on this. And as we said, if you could be respectful of the time, Judy will be the timekeeper, and maybe it's going to be necessary to shorten so that we can have great participation. So Judy, do you want to invite someone?
Sure. So Cheryl Tolbert is one of our circle leaders down in Louisiana. So Cheryl, I would love for you to share your perspective with what's going on with the rest of us, if you could.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not sure.
Cheryl, hi, thank you.
Hey.
New Orleans is going to be the next epicenter of the crisis here, so it's great that you are able to join our call to share what's going on.
So Renee Amar is also my co-circle leader, and she's on the call as well. So I'd like to get her input after mine. But and I don't even know if I'm even answering your questions addressing your question correctly, but yes, New Orleans is being hit hard. We understand that some of the discussion is because of Mardi Gras, and the possibility that was kind of our catalyst for the virus in New Orleans. And I'm not a doctor and a statistician and all of that, so I don't really know if that's a main factor or not. It is, of course, spreading throughout our state. Our governor, he's probably doing a press conference now, is informing everyone of our statistics here. I'm struggling with the data, struggling with the numbers. I'm not exactly sure where some of the numbers are coming from. But, personally, I think that there's a lot of misinformation. And I think in some cases, some of the articles that we're seeing doesn't help. So it's good to see other articles. In the article that you're referencing, I skimmed through it. I apologize, I didn't get to read it very deeply, but I think we need more data. I think we need accurate data, and I think we need accurate information so we can respond to something of this magnitude. And so that's my thoughts, and I'd love Renee to chime in next.
Let me find Renee on the list. I hope, thank you for sharing, Cheryl. We really.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting. There is also in today's paper, I invite you all to look at this article from the Wall Street Journal. Again, it's an opinion piece on is the COVID-19 as deadly as they say, prepared by professors of medicine at Stanford around the sampling data that we are using to really establish the death rate. And that is something I think that as citizens we can demand and ask of our decision makers to take into account all of the data points. Renee, great to have you, and I know you're unmuted, so I'll have you share your perspective.
Ladies, I'm assuming that y'all can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, I got a new computer a couple of weeks ago, and I don't do well with technology. I think one of the things that I'm most interested in hearing the debate about today is I work for a think tank, obviously, in Louisiana, and we've issued some suggestions to the government for executive order, as well as we're doing webinars on a weekly basis. But I am deeply interested in hearing some debate about the government's response by shutting down private businesses in reaction to the COVID-19 crisis. Obviously, we're about to go through some pretty seriously hard economic times because of it. And we are questioning internally a lot about how we respond as a free market think tank, considering we really don't believe the government has the right to shut down private businesses, even in a time like this. And so that was kind of what I wanted to hear some discussion about today, because we're trying to figure out, personally, how we respond as a think tank to this.
Yeah, I think that's a really a great question, and also I think this is one I know that we're encouraging business owners and individuals to share what they are doing to limit the spread of the virus. So a lot of businesses have implemented new procedures for sanitation, to protect their employees, to letting them work remotely if they feel that they are they are at risk of spreading the virus. And I think that narrative, those initiatives of personal responsibility from business and individual need to be heard by our representatives and decision makers, because right now all of the decision is made to stop the irresponsibility, and that narrative of responsibility needs to really be heard. So I know we have Deanna Bass-Williams also on the call.
Erin has joined us. Erin is here.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing.
We'll get to Deanna in a second. So hold on, Deanna. We love you too. All right. Aaron's unmuted now.
Hi.
Great. Hi, Aaron. Are you
Hey.
on the phone?
Hi,
Oh,
everybody.
great. You're on video. Great to see you.
Yeah.
Great to see
too.
you. Well, I gave an introduction to everyone while we were waiting for you to join us. And I explained how I know you very well. And I know
Yeah.
how you are thoughtful, analytical, and you had the best of intentions in producing this piece that is substantive. It's about, you guys, 27 pages. So you spent a lot of time doing this research. And I'd like to ask you, you know, you're not, I gave everyone an introduction of who you are, and you're not an epidemiologist. You're
Yep.
not a public health expert.
Yep.
However, you felt a calling to do this research and share it and make it available to the broader population. And I'd love for you to share a little bit of your thinking that and about what compelled you to spend a lot of time putting pen to paper and questioning the analysis that we have today.
So yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, I've known Todd and Sylvie for a number of years now, and know the broader family. Love the family. Love your house, by the way. Thank you for hosting me last time I was there. And what really motivated me was hearing when my friends started closing their businesses, and I felt that this was completely unjustified. And I heard from one of my friends that runs a church out here in Texas that he said, I feel completely helpless. And I was like, and I immediately said back to him, this is not America. So I spent maybe like a week reading and researching, and you know, I've a lot of experience with data and how people acquire and how people get converted in byproducts. And what I saw was that the hysteria was not being adequately justified in the evidence. And so I spent a lot of time on WHO, CDC, Johns Hopkins, Harvard Medical School, Stanford Epidemiology, and I produced a piece that basically was a survey of all the data. And it was not making necessarily a particular argument outside of skepticism. So what I wanted to, the main thing I wanted to, we didn't kind of echo. One of the main things I wanted to pitch was the title of the piece, evidence over hysteria. So what I wanted to sort of spark a flame in was, one, I wanted people to see that we were trusting people that were actually hysterical, that were not justifying their opinions by actual evidence, but rather telling you doomsday scenarios that actually the data was going only one direction. And as you've seen today, I don't know if y'all heard, but you need to push the word out. The original study that actually got us here, the Imperial College study by Neil Ferguson, which had this huge, death graph. 500. He only studied UK. 500,000 deaths if we don't do anything. Last night he updated his graph and he adjusted it down to 10,000. He changed the quarantine timeline from 18 months to now 2 weeks. So these are the people that we trusted, right, to give us good advice to end up being 100% wrong. So what happened is that, it went viral. So in 24 hours, it got 3 million views. Through all the sites now, it's up to over 15 million-ish. And then what happened after that was the Stanford Epidemiology Department, including the most cited physician in the world, the most cited scientist in the world, Dr. Ioannidis, right? He emailed me and he said, Aaron, this is like one of the best pieces I've read on the subject. Thank you for writing this. You did a public good. We will be coming out soon next week basically with the dad, I'm on a call. Sorry, my dad's in there. So basically he said that I was right. And that's when he came out on Tuesday. Dr. Levitt, the Nobel laureate biophysicist at Stanford, came out on Monday saying the same thing. 2 epidemiologists wrote Wednesday. Imperial College updated their study today. So what I want now, the phase of the debate, like the academic phase of this, the epidemiologists who are scaring you, like it's basically dead. So now the debate's going to move, which we all have to be aware of. Confirmation bias fantasy land will now enter. Well, they will justify their actions, which someone said earlier, I didn't see who was actually talking, that they're going to justify that they made the right decision We must never allow the American government to do this to us ever again. They literally treated us like we were losers, right? It wasn't like, hey, let's like figure this out. Let's grow our way out of this. Like, let's build, let's innovate. They're like, no, I'm going to lock you in your homes and the government's going to take care of you. We must, it doesn't matter even, one of the most egregious people that pushed this was Governor Devine, right? Two weeks ago, he said 100,000 cases right now in Ohio. In 2 weeks, it'll be 200 and 210-ish thousand. Today, he has 500,000-ish cases. That's the type of person that we need to call out and say, you put your economy into a recession, maybe depression, like we'll find out. You ruin millions of people's lives. It's his fault. Like, the academics should be free to mess in models all day long, right? Because we want that. We want academic freedom. We want free speech. It's up to the politicians to make judgment calls. And they made a seriously bad judgment call and fed into the hysteria and ruined 50% of businesses in America are not open right now, right? That's their fault. So we need to hold them accountable to that.
Let's, when maybe this is something that you could give our listeners some, a roadmap a little bit, so that when you are in a position of leadership, and we shared at the beginning, like truth and details matter. Well, what are the kind of questions that we need to ask our leaders to ask themselves when they see data? And I know one of your points is about a lonely number is a dangerous number, yes. Right? This is always relative. And I know that when I'm when I'm getting a response, for instance, I got an email from our state representative on condolences on the losses in our district due to the coronavirus. I replied back and I said, this is very alarming to my family, this type of statement. What are the number of deaths associated to coronavirus in our district? Yeah. And I have not received a response, right? We need to push back. So I think it'd be great for you to just give us what are the 3 or maybe just 2 questions that we always need as decision makers. We always need to ask ourselves when we receive data that on topics that we're not expert in, because it takes a lot of courage to dispute a doctor's point of views and data. So it'd be great for you to just share that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So one, realize that when someone argues back with you on credentialism, that's essentially an ad hominem attack. So that means that they lost the debate. So they're relying on the fact of, hey, just trust me, right? As if that's like American, like don't be skeptical. Like, I'm an expert, right? Sit down. Shut up, as Tucker says, shut up and obey, right? So, and by the way, Tucker has a lot to blame here too for this hysteria. So the one question I would always ask is compared to what, right? Never trust a lonely number. So X number of people died in my district. Proper response was like, well, compared to what? Like number, maybe how about flu deaths? Maybe compared to alcoholism, maybe compared to car accidents, maybe compared to, right? So compared to what? And then the second question you should ask is, what is the goal, right? So that was my main, for those that you read it, and unfortunately the one that went viral was an older version of the piece for somehow someone got before I updated it. And the one that went viral was much more, was updated, and then people started sharing older one. It's the core argument's still the same. The second is like, what is the goal? Which was my main skepticism, is like, total case is a bad metric because it's a losing metric, because you always will lose, because it always will increase, right? Because we don't know the total population that's infected. We're trying to measure the number of people that are right now. So it's always going to increase, most likely. So you should always ask, like, well, what is the goal? Is the goal growth rate? Is it hospitalizations? Is it severity? Is it total number of cases, right? So when all of these things started happening in all of our states, I mean, I guess, half of the country is in some form of shelter in place. You should ask your politician, well, what was the goal? They never offered one, right? They just said out of abundance of caution. So we should hold them accountable, being like, hey, you caused maybe even half of your businesses to close in your state. Well, what's the goal? Why did you do that, right? So those two questions, compared to what, and what's your goal? What are you optimizing against? Oh, Sylvia, you're muted, I think.
The healthcare system, right? So that was like, I know the primary preoccupation was not to exhaust the healthcare system. Yep. In this case, that was the argument made by the politicians.
Yeah, well, so the interesting thing about that is they've already moved that goalpost, right?
Right.
Because originally the predicted severity case, according to WHO, was 20 to 19%-ish, right? So about that range would be hospitalized, which is significant, absolutely significant. So now, according to COVID Tracker, according to Dr. Bricks, who's awesome, we're looking at 9-ish%. So about 50% off. You're like, okay. So,
That's a big
and
number.
yeah. And then the hospitalization rate that's coming out of New York, originally on Sunday, it was increasing every 2.2 days, right? Now we're up to like 5 days, right? So all of these original models that we've been relying on, one is the study I mentioned earlier today, Imperial College State. We're all wrong, right? And so we need to remember what is said, like screenshot those articles, right? And get the word out that like we need to hold these people accountable, because otherwise, like, they could do this again with any other old thing of climate change or whatever public health thing they think is an emergency.
Right. I'd like to turn it over to our audience. We have really great participation here, and people are very interested in hearing your views. So thank you for taking the time to join us. Judy, do you want to invite some of our participants to share their perspective or comments here?
Sure. Deanna Bass-Williams is another circle leader in the Washington, D.C. area. Deanna, we'd love to hear your perspective.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Well, listen, thank you so much for writing this article. Thank you, Sylvie, for hosting this conversation. I will say that I read this article with my husband, and we had a very spirited conversation about it. And I think people all over the country are having spirited conversations about this very issue. And I first must say that I need to put a disclaimer on what I say. I am a free market capitalist. I run my own business. My sister is my business partner. The proudest moment in my life was when my 12-year-old niece started selling her Halloween candy on the bus. So I believe in free markets and in capitalism. I will say that as we have kind of guided our clients on this issue, we had a client who actually came to us and who wanted to write. Doesn't have the background that you have, but he runs real estate firms all across the country. And he wanted to write something about how hysterical we are behaving. And we cautioned him because of the very response that you received. We wanted to give him the counsel that we understand what you're saying. We are being hysterical, but you have to understand, like, we as your consultants have to tell you that if you say these things, the media will destroy you. You will be attacked viciously in the media. And we counseled him not to do that because the crisis communications around managing this man's business, as he said these things, was not, in our view, worth it for the heat that he would receive, that I'm sure you're feeling right now. From another practical side of it though, like, I have a mother who's diabetic, my husband's over 60, and because of this hysteria, I've left my house, but I haven't left my neighborhood in 2 weeks. And so I'm fortunate in that I can do, like, I have my business hasn't stopped. I can do business wherever there's internet, but I recognize that most Americans are not in my position. So because of an abundance of caution and the mother that I adore and the husband who I love, I feel like I am feeding into the hysteria. Even as I look at your numbers, and as my husband and I had our little spirited debate, we were talking about the idea that the morgues in New York are being overcrowded. And we went and looked at the people who are saying they're overcrowded, and it's in the articles all say a person familiar with the matter, but the people who are managing the morgues in New York are saying that the names that are listed in these articles, the people who manage it, say that there is no problem. So I guess the long view and my question for you is, yes, it does appear to be hysteria, but when you are dealing with actual human beings and when it's the risk of your diabetic mother, then I'm telling her, do not leave the house or we will chain you to your bed.
Thanks for sharing, Deanna. One point, Aaron, it would be is, what were your lessons learned? When you want to raise an alarm like you did, what would you do perhaps a little bit differently, or what would you advise, based on this experience, what would you advise Deanna or, other consultants or even ourselves who are thinking, who want to speak up, right? What did you learn? And then maybe it'd be great to share with our group here.
Yeah. So the main point of the article was to allow debate, right? So I wanted to spark the debate, and it seemed like that succeeded, I guess, because y'all started debating, which is kind of like the point is like we were in this sort of like lull, weird state where we were just deferring. And as a natural skeptic, I was just like, this doesn't make any sense. Why should I give you this authority, right? So that was, you don't want to, I think the main thing that I wanted to happen out of this, which is why I haven't public commented outside of Dennis Prager show and here, because I love Dennis as a friend and I love the Prager show, was that I didn't want it to be about me, because I'm willing to be the scapegoat. That's fine. Like, I don't care. Like, I knew where the data was going, right? So you gotta, like, I guess when you want to build a movement of people to disagree with you, you have to make it not about yourself. You have to make it about other people that are going to come alongside you, right? They can also defeat some of these main arguments that people are throwing against you, right? Like you're not a doctor, and you're like a Nobel laureate biophysicist that was the only person to accurately project the total infected in China, right? Came out Monday and said, it was like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. We should like really reassess this hysteria, right? So you have to kind of like learn to play like a longer term game, right? So I didn't go after one guy, a University of, I think it's Wisconsin biologist, right? His blog is actually really great, and I read it all the time. Wrote this like, sort of Twitter storm that everything he wrote was like easily rebuttable, and I didn't want to write back because I didn't want to be about me, and I knew where the data was going, so I knew like eventually in like a week or two that America was going to change its mind, because the data I thought was so compelling that people like him who have an hysteria would be shown as being hysterical. So I would say that with this case, with the fear, which is my main concern coming out of this, I do think that we're an accelerated path outside of all these shelter-in-place stuff, is that we have to address the fear, that we had to reimagine that what happened to us is the same hysteria of kids in cages, of Donald Trump's going to destroy the economy, of like, I mean, go down the list, right? Of rising anti-Semitism, which was proven wrong, to like, we are in a hysterical cycle in our culture and this was just a backdoor entry that none of us saw. That rather than thinking about this from a medical perspective, from a data perspective, right? Rather than protecting people like my parents or my grandfather, right, who's currently isolated in his home, we decided to embrace a hysterical view that's very similar to these other more political, like impeachment, right? Like all these big emotional things. And I think that from my perspective, we have to allow people to be forgiven. And so this academic that caused all this trouble, he, with his, out of amazing academic honesty, republished his piece and retracted his model. So we should say to him, thank you for being honest, and I forgive you, because it's ultimately not his fault. Like he made a mistake, and it's really the politicians are the ones that we should be issuing judgment calls against. So I think for our neighbors, we have to allow them in the matrix context, right, to take the other pill. We have to allow them to be wrong and allow them to sort of come back and say like, hey, like we just disagreed on this. It's okay. Like now we're in a different phase. But what we need to do, I'm not really concerned about our neighbors and people that have shamed you, right? Virtue signaling, shaming, you're not social distancing enough. Please don't touch your family, right? Love them from 6 feet away, right? We can forgive those people, right? But we need to reorient ourselves to those that lead us, that's our mode of accountability. As I wrote in the piece, luckily we're blessed with an election in November. So we should all remember that.
So thanks, Aaron. We have Judy. Do you want to call on Ann?
Ann Main. She is one of our Policy Circle members in the Vernon area Policy Circle. Ann, welcome to the call. We'd love to hear your perspective.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I just want to tell a brief bit about me and what I'm bringing to this. I am a scientist, although I've been a college teacher for the last 26 years. I've taught a variety of courses, including public health, currently teaching my emerging world diseases class, teaching it remotely now. I'm also a local elected official and on our county board. So I wear literally a lot of different types of hats in this. And I just want to address some concepts or bring some ideas up for people to think about. And this may get to Aaron's point about, holding our politicians, our local officials accountable. And that is, I think a lot of the issues, and I read part of Erin's stuff, not all of it, is that overall we suffer from scientific illiteracy in this country. And that's one of the things I've been trying to combat. And it's just that people don't understand these concepts. And I've seen businesses, even this you guys mentioned, thank you, about viral, and it's different, but businesses say it's in our DNA, or we talk about this work ecosystem. And so they use science words, but they don't use them the same way scientists do. And I've also always faulted scientists, because we use words in ways that other people, they understand the words differently. We say, well, we look for something soon. And soon for a scientist could be 5 years out, because we take a very, very long range look at things. And so I think one of the things I'd like to, either I misunderstood or I understood and can disagree with Erin about, is about the data. So you only have the data that you have at the moment, right? And with infectious diseases, we know that we're always behind the curve because we don't have all of the results there or not. And scientists are actually very comfortable accepting the fact that we don't have the answer and that we can be wrong. And that's part of the scientific model. So if you are a good scientist, you accept very easily, or you should, that once you go through your scientific process and you get to the end, that your results do not support your original hypothesis, and you have to go back to that. And I don't think, I've given talks in other places about why I think there should be more scientists involved in elected positions, because they take a different, I'm going to look at the data, I'm not trying to win for one side or the other. And I just want to point out that we didn't have the final death rate of the 2018 flu, which was a stronger seasonal flu. We didn't get those data, the final death rates, until really this year. So I think it's a challenge. I'm not going to address some of the free market things, but I think that, you know, one of the ways, and I can understand overreaction, again, being an elected official, people want action, right? I think Americans, they want action as opposed to not action. So we're pushed that way, right? We'll get off out of the traffic jam, even though it's going to take us longer, because we want to be moving. And it's, I think people felt a little bit like, it's there's a fire in your house. Do you wait till it gets to the first floor to get your kids out? Or do you say, I'm going to get the kids out, I'm going to let them come, and then I can make a decision, and then I can go back in. So I got to say, I was watching this in January in China for my class, and we talked about it. But viruses also, they technically not living, but they mutate, they change. So their trajectory of what they're going to do, we can't predict that. So I just wanted to put those science concepts out there as something for people to think about.
So great. Thank you so much for sharing, because this science illiteracy, this morning, I woke up with that thought that journalists need to have a statistic class, and maybe it's a scientific mindset, because it is, as you said, we seek action. We don't really value analysis, because we even have the expression analysis paralysis. But as leaders, I think we need to really have that scientific mindset and maybe understand it better and apply it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Anne. I think that is really, really great. Erin, do you have a comment there? Erin, you're muted.
I got him. He's on mute.
All right. Yeah. So no, I agree that this is why for Dr. Ferguson of the Imperial College, you know, he was hashing this out publicly with the University of Oxford Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, and the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, which is more like my people, right? Like the epidemiology lab in Stanford is an evidence-based medicine lab. They're running models showing that, hey, he's like, hey man, like you're really, really wrong, right? And we should give him props for, one, like he made an initial model and he ended up being wrong as we gave him like more data. So like academics should have the freedom to you know, pitch ideas, and like this is the debate. I think that where I was you know, arguing in the piece was like, I think we should take a much more of evidence-based, measurement-based approach to this, because there were so many questions that were unmet, like not answered, right? As an example, one area that I have updated as we've gotten more data is about the asymptomatic caseload. So, originally WHO and CDC both have said that asymptomatic case spread is not something of concern. Both of them have said that repeatedly. In fact, Dr. Brooks denies that Senator Rand Paul is asymptomatic, right? So after talking to the epidemiology lab in Stanford, they persuaded me that actually the caseload is significantly higher than we think. The infection rate is much higher than we think. And I now updated that with the studies that they've given me. And now basically I put it back to the fact of the original authority said, this isn't a concern. Now it's kind of actually it's kind of a significant debate right now of we don't fully know. So the issue, I think the way in which a lot of public policymakers are responding to this was going to make it almost impossible for us to know whether or not we are going the right direction or the wrong direction. Like the University of Washington Virology Department has changed their criteria for their measurement of testing. So for 2 weeks they were here, and now they just publicly changed it, but they keep all the data on the same graph. So you're like, wait a minute, now all the data is different. You're sampling from different people, you're sampling from different types of folks.
Yes.
And that becomes the issue when journalists just take that graph and publish it. You're like, well, there's no context to that, right?
Right.
And to their credit, University of Washington said they were doing it publicly, but as you just alluded to, Sylvie, that doesn't get translated, right? It doesn't get translated to politicians or journalists.
Right, and I think that then maybe that is as leaders in our communities, as this is something that we can ask of our journalists, is having that scientific mindset and the scientific analysis whenever they present numbers. I'd say in Quebec, for instance, right now, Quebec is using the probable cases as a number. So, it's showing as 1,000 in Quebec and 500 everywhere else. So anyway, but that gives a different perspective on the death rate. So I know we had Colleen, I think she dropped her hand. We want to be wrapping up, unfortunately. Aaron, I'd love for you to just, in conclusion, what would you do differently if you were to publish something like that again? If something like this happened, would you do exactly the same thing? You felt this was actually really effective. Would you do something differently? And then did you have a big following before on Medium, or this was just really organic? I don't think you did, right? You didn't have a huge following, right?
Yeah, because I actually don't want to be in the ideas economy, because I rather, as Sylvie knows, build cool stuff and work on technology. So I think one of the things everything I wrote at that time, I believed was accurate. It was well cited. I think that things that would change would be that I used probably too much low-level language for a lot of the sort of academic critiques of it, interchanged the word cases and infected and things like that. Because again, the purpose of it was general audience, was not meant for that. The one thing I did not predict that would happen would be the level of sort of virality that happened. I knew it was going to cause a lot of controversy. I did not expect it to be that fast, right? And then the second thing was I intentionally did post it on Medium because I knew it was kind of a little bit of a high risk platform of being removed. But I didn't think they were actually going to do it because it was so well cited. I'm like, there's no way that they would actually do it, right? But then they did it, and it had this, I don't know if y'all heard of this. It's called the Streisand effect. It's this new, if you remove something, it then goes more viral. So then it went incredibly more viral, right? And I didn't really predict that, but the interesting thing was that this conversation quickly moved, right? Especially when the Wall Street Journal defended me on Sunday, and the editorial board that it was well cited. This should definitely be part of the debate. We need to discuss this. That then the debate quickly shifted away to do we even have a right to say something? And of course we do. And then you saw other people begin to speak out. So I would say one is I would have definitely tightened up a lot more of the language. I would have shortened some components of it, and been a little bit more clear in the headlines about the because I viewed this as like a survey. Like I was just intellectually like walking through things about how I was seeing it. But other people took that as if it was like a medical paper or an academic paper that was making a specific argument in every section. When in reality, I was saying kind of like, I don't really like, you know, the effective rate of children, right? Like if you look at the data, for some reason, kids, there's just a much lower number of positive cases for children. And we don't really know why. And I mentioned that in there. And then some people were being critical as if I was making claims. Like, actually, it wasn't, because we don't really understand what's exactly going on there in that component. So, but the one area that a lot of people wanted was like, oh, you should have had this reviewed by Dr. Ioannidis or Dr. Sorry, I forgot his last name. His name is Jay at the epidemiologist in Stanford. And actually, I disagree with that, because part of the purpose of it, as I wrote at the end, I said, who am I? I'm nobody. And that's the point, right? Because that's the American way, is that we allow you the freestanding ability to speak up against power. And it doesn't, you know, we don't run the country based on experts. Like, that's just like not the way. We vote on a person to take in advice from experts to then execute policy on behalf of the people, right? As in, the government is for us, by us. So that's one area that have gotten more people, like people that supported the article saying, well, you should have like at least had like endorsed by this. And I was like, no, because then it like makes it still about credentialism, as if you're only an epidemiologist, you can say something. So I would say that like feel confident that like you have a voice in this country, because that's the whole our republic is built on that concept. Now, it doesn't mean that you should just go willy-nilly and like spread, like don't be well cited and don't be well researched, right? But like it means that do not let people tell you don't have a voice, because this country is not built on that concept. You always have a voice, you have agency, you can change the direction of your local community and hopefully eventually the country. We are not run by, DC, New York, and LA. We are run by all, like the entirety of America. And that was the sort of emotional piece at the bottom section was very much more emotional, because I was just hearing all my friends' businesses close and how they're laying off people. Like 3.3 million people are unemployed right now, right? The exponential growth is the economic damage, right? So, but the last part was very much more emotional and much more opinionated. So yeah, I guess to summarize, I would say the things that I definitely stand.
Yeah,
What?
stand for what you believe. You say, like stand for what you believe. Make
Yes.
sure you quote recognized sources, and
Yes, absolutely.
just talk on top with like truth and detail matters. And I think like your piece, your attitude really embodies what the policy circle is all about, which is each of us has a voice and we need to speak up with truth and details that matter and thoughtfulness. So, I want to close the call. Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us. This was really special, I think, for us to be able to offer. So,
Yeah, so one thing. So the one thing I think that if I could have like one headline summary is be easy on people and hard on ideas. And just take that forward, like let people like debate ideas, don't be personal, allow people to be wrong, allow yourself to be wrong, because realize the goal is discover what's true. So just that's the way we can de-escalate is easy on people, hard on ideas.
yeah, that's a good quote. Well, thank you so much. Judy, do you have some, so thank you. We'll be, thank you again, Aaron. You have a great day. We'll look forward to talking to you again. So we will be writing up a recap that we'll be posting on the site. Thank you everyone for participating. I know we didn't have a chance to go through everybody's questions too. So if you want to send us an email at communications@thepolicycircle.org with your remarks and perspective and comments, we'd love to do that. I would like to encourage you, I think this was a real, push of being courageous and and really taking the time to write a letter to the editor, and we will be posting the resources to help you do that, and kind of giving you guidelines on how to do that, and to contact your local representative. This is a time where people need to hear from voices of reason, and having sounding boards as they gather information and try to make decisions. So I would invite you to not hesitate to do that. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Bye.